Welcome back to Yin and Yang Healing with Kirsten and Dur, exploring beyond the physical. Today, guys, I want to talk about passed down, inherited trauma through the family line and how it can affect things like your sleep, like your relationship, like basically anything in your life.
Everything.
Yeah, it shapes who we are as people. And it's one of like the key things that I like to teach my clients, because you can like take this, you know, for the rest of your life and uncover root causes for stuff. And I don't know if we're going to have time to go through the entire process in this episode. So definitely make sure that you subscribe using the link in the description, because I sometimes even do this live and it takes like, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the crowd. But yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so are we gonna go to like the basics then? This is part one.
Yeah, so I guess my thought process behind this is I just wanted to kind of explain how it sort of works. And I think it makes sense to kind of just go back to the beginning, because I think a lot of people just don't realize how much we can take on from our family and how it really does affect us. So just to kind of put this in context, when your mother is in your grandmother's womb, her eggs are already in her body. And so technically you as an egg are in her body. And so you could have energetically trauma transfer from your grandmother.
Oh, that's so wild.
Which
is so cool.
Pretty wild. And then even more so beyond this is like the energetic family circle. It's kind of like a vortex in a way, when there's a part of the circle that gets removed or like fucked up or something like that. It creates this like vortex in the family energetically. So I don't know if you have any examples, Kirsten, but I'm just thinking of, let's say, for example, someone dies at like an early age in the family.
Yeah.
And maybe it was for some reason that is not socially acceptable. And so then the family wouldn't acknowledge and let that person's energy pass on in kind of an honoring way. That energetically creates this void in the family circle and creates this like vortex that like fucks with all the energy of everyone else.
I feel like part 5 on this is gonna like end up talking about like family constellations. I'm excited.
That's absolutely where my practice is going. So
they did a study. I don't know what study it was called, but they did a study that showed that was it mice or was it a different animal where they train them to basically be afraid of like something, and then that like passed down like genetically, but the next generations were like like when they saw a certain flower or something like that. I could totally be getting this wrong, but just go with me. It's the same concept.
Yeah.
So then when they saw that flower, like whatever it was, then they would like be afraid, even though they were like so many generations removed from that initial like trauma of like being afraid of that certain thing, but it still like passed down that they were still like afraid of the thing.
It's
pretty wild.
I think yeah, that does demonstrate, like, it does demonstrate this concept pretty well, of course. And I think there's a couple of components to it. It's the energetic piece like we just described, and it's also the behavioral mimicry that we're so cute as humans that we do is to
right.
So yeah, so anyway, there's this exercise that I actually took from Mark Wolynn in his book, It Didn't Start With You. called the core language exercise. And it's basically uncovering energetically charged words and phrases that you use to describe your situation, your pain, your ailment, whatever it is. And there's a couple of different components to it. There's your core complaint. So whatever it is that you're complaining about, maybe you have a pain in the neck or you have Crohn's disease or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Your core descriptor, and that kind of describes just this like tape that plays inside of you. Your core sentence, which is like a snappy, short little phrase that typically will lead to the core trauma.
Do you have
And
an
then
example of that?
Of like of the core sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it could be something like they'll leave me, or I'll be all alone, I'll die. So it's very short and to the point, and it's typically very energetically charged for the person.
Do you think that most people are aware of like this thought, or do you think it's kind of coming and it's like very fleeting, like it's just like a quick? Do you think
Yeah,
like is it in their subconscious or their conscious?
it's most likely in most people's subconscious is probably very fleeting, but there's a way to become aware of it. And this is one of the strategies that I like to teach people.
Yeah.
Because I think that, when we talk about muscle testing and follow your intuition, I feel like for some people that's just so intangible and hard for people to grasp. And this technique is a little more tangible because you can go through the steps. It's like a step by step. You actually write stuff down. Like it's kind of like a journaling technique. And you can use it for the rest of your life, similar to how you would use like muscle testing or your intuition. And I think that this kind of resonates a lot for people and myself, because I remember before I actually learned sit and muscle testing, I actually tried to teach myself muscle testing. I was just like, I just don't fucking get it. Like, I don't know how to know if it's like actually saying yes, actually saying no, or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I guess it's like a very learned skill. We've been very trained out of it. So anyway, just the core language exercise is something that, well, maybe I can just kind of give a brief sort of overview of it. Have you heard of this one before, Kirsten?
Which?
This core language exercise?
No.
Okay, it's kind of good because then you'll be new to it and maybe you can just kind of ask more questions that people might be wondering. So I won't go super detailed into it. I'll give like a bit of a kind of general overview to start. And then we can maybe go into more detail in another episode or even on a live healing or something like that.
Okay. And what's it called again?
The core language exercise.
Oh, okay. I'm excited.
Excuse me. So yeah, you're uncovering those energetically charged things in your life. And like I said, you start with your core complaint because you can use this throughout your life for different things that come up, right? We've talked about this so many times before, how this type of healing is very multi-layered. So once you heal one layer, another layer becomes exposed. And you're like, okay, shit, now I got this layer to heal. And it just kind of keeps going and keeps going, which might actually feel a bit hard for some people hearing that. But it's just, I guess I just want people to know that it's just part of life. It's part of being human and having the human experience. We're always experiencing. So we're always going to have layers to heal. Yeah. So anyway, your core complaints, you would start off writing down, you would just try and take away all thoughts of like, my life is perfect, or like, I shouldn't be thinking this way, that kind of thing. And of course, again, like I would go even deeper, and I would break down barriers for people before we even did this, so that they could kind of take those rose colored glasses off and do this. But you would write down first, what is your biggest complaint in life right now? So for me, I'm like struggling with neck pain. So I'd write down, okay, I got my neck pain. And then like, what's the deepest, it can be even a feeling. So it's like, what's your deepest issue, your symptom, maybe a problem you're having in life, or just like a feeling. And like, what's the biggest complaint about, like, what's the biggest problem or feeling about that complaint? So if I say my neck pain, for example, it's so stiff, it's so sore, I just feel so stiff all the time. And then you would write down, what do you want to see shift from it, and just allow yourself to just put it all out there. Just write down everything that feels important, don't judge it. And then you would read it out loud. And it would be ideal if you had a highlighter or a different colored pen, and you just say everything that you wrote down, and highlight the things, say it out loud, and then highlight the words and the phrases that either are difficult to say, or just feel really intense, like maybe it's out of context, just things that really stick out to you. And so that would be uncovering your core complaint. And then you take it a step deeper. Are you writing this down?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. Okay.
Like, I gotta do this.
Like I said, like normally I take, last time I taught this live, it took us close to 2 hours to do it. Just kind of trying to help people like pull stuff out of them and stuff. But I just want to give a general overview so people kind of get an idea, and we can go deeper from there. But okay, so the next step would be your core descriptor. So there's a couple parts to this. The first part is you want to think about when you're growing up, and you're going to describe both your mother and your father in 2 different ways. The first way is, my mother was blank, fill in the blank. Same with your father. And then the second is, I blame my mother for blank. Same with your father. So that's the first part of it. Once you have those, then you think about your life as it is right now. And you do the same thing, but you do it for people who are closer to you. So, I guess this really depends on what's coming up for you as it pertains to the complaint that you've brought up. So it could be your partner, it could be your boss, it could be a close friend. It really depends on your life situation, right? Like, obviously, if you're single, it's probably going to be maybe your boss or a friend or something like that. And so you'd say, like, my partner is blank, or my boss is blank, and I blame him or her for what? And then the last part of it is similar to the core complaint, where you want to go and you want to say these things out loud, whatever you wrote down, and just see, like, is there anything emotional? Is there anything charged that stands out when you read it out loud? And just highlight them or underline them, or, just kind of keep it for the next part of it. So now you have your core complaint, you have your core descriptors, and now we move on to your core sentence. So this one I feel like is the hardest one for people to uncover. Just because it's hard sometimes for people to really simplify. But basically you want to take the things that you just uncovered and simplify it. So sometimes it can be linked to a traumatic family event or history in your childhood. And not always, but often it begins with I or they, kind of that, like the example that I provided earlier, which is like, they'll leave me, or I'll die, right? And it's usually pretty dramatic. Like, I'll die, like that's pretty dramatic. and it contains emotionally charged language of your greatest fear. And it also can often cause a physical reaction when you say it out loud. So you might need to kind of reiterate it a few times to find that thing that really is like, ooh, that really kind of punched me in the gut. You know what I mean? But basically what we're doing is we're locating or retrieving these like lost traumas in your family or your life. And it helps us kind of recover these memories and help us kind of link it together with what we're experiencing.
So
And
what
for
if
some
someone,
people, sorry, go ahead.
what if someone says like, I don't want to like uncover like that stuff. I just want to leave it in
Yeah.
the past. I don't want
Yeah.
to
So
relive that.
that's fair enough question. And like I said earlier, that's part of the reason why I start with all my clients with breaking down barriers, because this isn't going to work if you're not ready to heal. You know what I mean? Like if you're in denial, kind of like that, it's like, I'm not ready to touch on this. Then it's going to be a lot harder for you to go ahead and heal this. You can
So
work maybe more closely one-on-one with me. That might
what if
help kind of bring it out.
someone says like, what's the purpose of going back? Because I had a friend who actually would always like say that to me. So I'm just curious, like, what if someone was like, okay, well, I'm ready to do it, but like, what's the purpose of it?
Yeah, I think this actually, okay, so I saw recently, I think it was on TikTok or something, someone was saying, well, time doesn't heal all wounds. Because that's like the classic saying, time heals all wounds, right? And I agree and disagree. In this way is that you can in my opinion, you can absolutely heal all wounds, but it doesn't mean that you're going to lose the memory. You can still have a memory. You just aren't going to have the same subconscious reaction to it. And so that's the reason why we want to go back to these memories that are causing a physical, mental, behavioral reaction, is because that wound is still open. And so
Right.
while you'll likely always have the memory, if you heal your wound and you shift your perspective, that memory isn't going to trigger the same reactions in your body and your behavior anymore. So that's why we want to go back. We want to heal that. And we've talked about this in other episodes, how, if you're being faced with this, if you're, finding us and you're finding out about this kind of healing, it's probably because you're a generational pattern breaker. And, that's the role that you're playing in your family right now. And I can't stress how important that role is. It's so important. It fucking sucks at times, but not only are you going to help your family and generations to come, you're going to help yourself.
I think it sucks when you're first like realizing that you're the one. Like when you're first like realizing that you are kind of the black sheep, that you want to do things different. Like, when you first start realizing, wait a minute, why do I have to be the one to like break all the patterns? Like that's when it's hard because you're like, well, why do I have to be the one? Like that sucks.
Mhm.
And but the more you like get into it and the more that things get healed, like when you heal yourself, you heal your family line, the more that you do that work, the easier it becomes because you start shifting away from like this density on like being the pattern breaker and you more like embrace it because you see how things have shifted and healed and it's no longer so heavy or intense. It just everything I find that like everything like in my family anyways, after I started breaking all these cycles, everything has so much more flow now. And
Mhm.
it's like a lot less on me breaking cycles. It's just that I am the way that I am now and I don't allow certain things, right? And I don't react certain ways. So it just is not so much a burden anymore of being the cycle breaker. It's just things are just different now. They're lighter and easier.
Yeah. And
So it gets better.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, I can see how it would definitely build some resentment in some people. Like you were saying, like, why do I have to be the one to do this? Well, your soul, this is going to hurt a lot of feelings for people who are really religious, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Your soul chose the life that you're living before you came to Earth. And that's part of the reason why you're the generational pattern breaker. Your soul chose that path. That's not to say that like your entire life is laid out before you. You absolutely still have free will and choice, but there's like core lessons that your soul chooses when you come to this world, this
Yeah.
reality. And when you can accept that and realize that and become aware of that, it becomes so much easier to embrace this role, this path that you are in, and just be like, fuck yeah, I'm just going to be a badass. Usually, I find like a lot of these people end up being healers, but it's like, I'm just going to be a badass healer. Whatever it is, like, obviously, you don't have to become a healer, but even just exploring beyond the physical, like we said, we call it this for a reason, you're exploring beyond the physical because we are energetic beings and we're so much more than just physical.
100%.
But anyway, um I forget where I was at with all that, but
You were at
um
like we were at the like this like simplifying it.
okay, yeah, so let's um let's kind of try and break this down a little bit. So I just sort of explained a bit of what the core sentence could look like some of the attributes of it. So the first step would be if you think about your life now, if it were to go horribly wrong, or if your life were to just fall apart, or your core complaint were to become the worst it's ever been, what would be your worst fear? Like it would be like, my worst fear is, the worst thing that could happen to me is, and just write that down. And then we would take it a level deeper, and just based on the first thing that you wrote, you would do, what's the worst part of that? And then you write that down. What's the worst part of that? Write that down. And so you just keep going deeper and deeper until, because most people are going to write down something like, my worst fear is that, I don't know, I'll be left alone on the side of a creek in a shitty trailer. I don't know, something, kind of long-winded.
I was like,
Okay,
that's
well,
is that most people's?
no, that's actually kind of mine right now, but
I was like, that sounds
um,
pretty specific.
yeah, that's actually mine right now. So just a little bit of vulnerability there. Um, I already know what my core thing is right now. If I really bring it down, is I'll be all alone. That's my core one. I'll be alone. So anyway, point being is you want to, this is actually a technique that I do hear quite a few healers use, where it's kind of like, okay, well, what's the worst thing about that? What's the worst thing about that? Like, kind of thing. Just kind of pull it out of yourself, and you'll notice that it will get a little bit more specific, a little bit more specific. And then once you kind of get to that deeper level, your your worst fear will look something kind of like those examples that I gave. I'm all alone, they'll leave me, I'll go crazy, I'll kill myself or I'll die. Just like very dramatic, right? And then once you have that, you can fine tune it a little bit and you can just sort of flip it. So let's say, for example, you had maybe you had like I'm all alone. You might just try and rephrase it with some different variations. So for example, they'll leave me and I'm all alone. They're kind of a similar fear, but it's you're shifting it slightly. So you would kind of want to try and rephrase them slightly to see which one actually stands out more to you. So if we use that, for example, it's like, what stands out more if that was your fear? I'm all alone or they'll leave me. And just kind of say it out loud and see which one feels stronger. And then that would end up being your core sentence. And then now that you have all those things, you can go and look at your family tree and say, okay, where did something like this happen? Either in my life or in my family tree. And you can just go back to your great grandparents and your grandparents. I guess it depends how much you know of your family. Because some people don't know a lot about their family. And so you're kind of just guessing, you're just pulling bits and pieces from what you did learn from your parents. For me, I ended up having to go back, ended up going to my parents and being like, hey, what happened on this side of the family? Because there was one thing that I had uncovered doing this where there was something, I can't remember what the core sentence was, but basically what I learned was that on one side of the family, one of the children, and they were like a pretty big family, one of the children had an illegitimate child out of wedlock, and she was fairly young at the time. And so her parents took her child on as their own. So they like raised her kid as her sister. And it was never spoken about because it was in that time.
Yeah, that's a big no-no.
Yeah, like do not fucking talk about this shit. So anyway, that's what I uncovered. And I would have never uncovered that without doing this kind of work because the family wouldn't talk about it. And so I ended up getting out of one of my parents, be like, oh yeah, this happened. They're like, oh shit. And just the awareness of that alone can help you begin to heal some of those roots. And then of course, if you want to take it much deeper, you would work with someone like myself to help you reprogram it. So that is like the overall gist of how to do this core language exercise. Now, obviously, there's like different nuances, like what if nothing comes up and blah, 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 that I can definitely guide people through. But you could use this technique to help yourself uncover roots to things that you're experiencing in your life. So maybe you touch on one thing now, and then maybe in a couple of years, you have another thing that comes up that you just can't seem to move past. You can do the same exercise and see if it's connected.
So cool.
It's like there was one example in the book that I referenced earlier where this lady just had she had so much trouble falling asleep at night and all this kind of stuff, this like massive fear of being asleep. And when she did this exercise, she had uncovered that something had happened in her early age where she was just left alone and she was super fearful. And so what she ended up doing was, because she became aware of that and became aware of this pattern that she had with her mother. I don't remember the exact story. I'll have to uncover that for another episode, but I'll have to go back and reread it. But basically she was mimicking something that had happened to one of her parents, and her solution, so now that she's aware of it, she would put this image of them by her bedside table and say these words of like, hey, I see that you're here with me, we're safe, this kind of thing. And it like healed her insomnia in her sleep, which is pretty wild when you think about it.
That is wild.
Something so simple can heal that.
And I just want to say something on that because sometimes people will say, well, like if it goes back that far, like how come I didn't always have this my whole life? And I've heard people say that like all the time. And I'm like, well, there's something that comes along that triggers that old wound. Don't know what it is, but there's always some sort of like trigger. And then your body's like, oh yeah, we remember that now. Okay, insomnia. And then
That is
it's
so interesting that you bring that up, because in the same book, Mark Wolynn goes through this one story. I don't remember the exact details, but I remember the detailed part of it where it was this guy that was struggling with something that I think it was his grandfather had struggled with. And it was just like you were saying, he hadn't had any issues with that until he reached a specific age. And then it became the problem. But then once he did the exercise and found out this connection of it happening with his grandfather had, it was the exact same age. And so I just got shivers because I'm like, I know that it's really hard for some people to wrap their heads around because it's energetic, it's intangible, but it's like that vortex of that family circle energy. It fucking comes in. It just knows. I don't know how it knows, but it's a thing and it happens to people. And
yeah,
yeah.
it's wild. And I would say like honestly about like I would say over 50% of my sessions with people, they're holding emotions for other people in their family. So like it's all relative. It's all in the family. Like it's all
And again, this goes
it
back
happens.
to, yeah. And again, it goes back to that you're in this family for a reason. So it's like maybe your grandfather, I don't know, was like killed in a war at 23, and now you turn 23 and you start experiencing all these like pains in your back, and that's where your grandfather was shot in the war or something, you know? It's like your soul, your body, your energy knows these things that happen in your family. And if the family didn't address that, didn't acknowledge it,
That's
didn't
right.
honor it, someone down the line is going to experience it.
Yeah. And like even with my clients too, like sometimes you might not like when we do that kind of work and I'm like, well, you're holding for so and so or like this type of scenario, they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, that's the whole point. Like a lot of families, a lot of times you won't know because that the family like pushes it down, right? And sometimes people don't, the people aren't there anymore, like their parents are gone. I work with a lot of older clients. So they're not able to like access like that information, but we like clear the energy and resolve the emotions anyways, and that's enough to like make that shift in your body because it's energetic, it's somatic, it's the emotional pieces. We're gonna get it out. It's nice to have awareness on like what the issue is, but for healing, you don't always have to know exactly what happened. All you have to do is release those emotions.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I want to add to that, another really cool thing is if you work with a practitioner who knows how to do surrogacy, you can, and this is probably one of the most wild type styles of healing you can do, receiving a surrogate session or even a family constellation that's like surrogacy times 100. You will feel the things from that person, and that helps the practitioner uncover and heal some of that stuff. Like you'll feel it in your body and you'll feel how they were feeling, and you'll have these thoughts that you're just like, I don't know why I'm thinking this, I don't know why I feel like I want to go over here and hug this person or I don't want to be butt next to that person. And it's like you said, it's like you might not know what happened in that family line, but there's absolutely ways to connect with that energy and to begin to heal it. So
Yeah.
anyway,
So cool.
I on a previous episode I mentioned that I would do a live healing, and I would absolutely be doing I'd absolutely be doing like a walkthrough of this exercise too, because I really, really think that it's so valuable for people to show them how to do this and help them uncover some of their own stuff.
Yeah.
So use the link in our description here to subscribe and get connected with those free healings and free offerings. And yeah, let me know where you're at, guys, with all this. Let me know what's going on in
Yes.
your head. I feel like I feel like this is a big chunk for people to maybe take in, especially if they're kind of new to this.
Yeah, it's a lot to like digest. It's kind of wild, but there's a lot of freedom in doing this work. So, especially the generational stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yay.
Well, we're cutting this episode a little bit short today because we're both just, exhausted from the week and got a lot of shit going on.
Yeah.
So we'll just end it here. We'll say thanks everyone for listening. Drop your comments and your DMs to us so that we can help you further. And we'll
Yeah.
talk to you on the next episode.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye.